Wonderful. So, we are getting into the final session of the specific ITAM track. So, after this session, we've got a short break where we reset the room back into one big room for everybody again. So, the honour of closing us off on the ITAM stream is Alexandra, or how do you want to be referred to on this one? Because I know you have another name that people know you by.
Yeah, my short name is Sasha. I love it.
So,
people call me Alex, and I'm like, I got used to it, but I still cringe a lot.
So, joins us from Sam Expert. So many of you will have seen him on LinkedIn, YouTube, and things. You've got really good following and everything going on your YouTube channels these days.
By the way, using this opportunity, I'd like you to.
You're an influencer.
At least visit, and if you want to subscribe, it's up to you. It's samexpert.tv. It'll take you to the YouTube channel. It's just a redirect, basically. That's it.
So, and we're going to be talking about Microsoft licensing changes, and over to you.
And the so what question? Because when I was told there's a licensing track at the ITAM gathering, I thought, who wants to listen about licensing, nitty-gritty cores and stuff like that? But by the way, if you have questions, I will answer them. But the big question right now, and this is what, where Sam Expert is transitioning right now. So we started as one of like a myriad of software asset management companies that is Microsoft-centric. But we're transitioning more into business consulting company right now. So first of all, ELPs. Yes, they are a byproduct of what we do, but I hate them. So I don't know why somebody needs an ELP, really, without any follow-up. So yeah, so we're on a mission to take complexity and bollocks out of Microsoft licensing. Excuse my French. I'm not a native speaker. I'm allowed to say it. And we are basically like we're two people. So we do certain stuff around financial planning, cloud migration, audit, defense, the usual stuff. Big thing that we do is what this presentation is half about, is SPLA compliance, SPLA governance, SPLA audit defense, SPLA, hosting providers. We support service providers that hosts Microsoft software a lot. And audits are still, if you know that in the typical Microsoft world, audits have almost disappeared. They actually halved, but the thing is, they reduced the quantity by 50%, but the media noise has completely disappeared. So they're still going on, but nobody's hearing, but nobody's talking about them. In the services providers world, what was the word I'm looking for? Proliferating. So it's really difficult there. So well, I'll skip through this. I'll just say I've been around Microsoft for more than 20 years. Never worked for Microsoft. But I used to do stuff for them money. And that's, by the way, that's the answer to why I said that I read 10,000 of Microsoft licensing pages, because they paid me to do it. Yeah. I would never. So okay, anyway, so you may have heard that on the 1st of October, so basically this month, Microsoft introduced changes into Microsoft licensing. So I'm not exaggerating saying that they changed the entire hosting landscape, bring your own license landscape, completely. And let's talk about so what. Let's talk about what's changed, and then let's talk about why it's important and where you may look for maybe new opportunities, maybe reshape the way you do your cloud. Do we have any providers here at all? Any SaaS companies? Well, I know Flixera does some SaaS, but okay. So you are mostly either end users or consultants, correct? Mm-hmm. Fine. Because I need to shape my presentation in the right way. So firstly, the first change: any subscription license may be taken and brought to any services provider. With a little nuance, I'll tell about. At the news, it's not legal, by the way. But anyway, that's the thing you need to understand. So what Microsoft did is, if you have any subscription license, either with software assurance, subscription with software assurance, CSP subscription, it now can be taken without any checks and a long due diligence to any provider. They really simplified it to that. Windows Server, as a consequence, now has bring your own license rights, which it didn't have. Again, that's a big change. Windows Server can be now licensed to a virtual machine, and because we are here mostly about the end users, on premises and in the cloud, when you bring your own license to the cloud. Providers didn't get this right. They can host your Windows Server workloads licensed like this, but they cannot sell SPLA virtual machines through this licensing program. So this is purely end user centric change. And Windows 11, two things happened. So this is a bit difficult to explain easily. But previously, I'll give you an example. If you had users with Chromebooks, even with Windows E3, E5 subscription licenses, they still couldn't access VDAs unless they had a VDA add-on. Now, you don't need it. So they simplified it. The other thing, which is related to CSP licenses, previously you couldn't virtualize them on premises, only on a third-party platform. Now you can. Which was a big shortcoming of the CSP licenses. And I had a client that switched from an enterprise agreement to CSP because they were small. And then Microsoft told them, by the way, your VDA farm that you have in your office, you can't use that. What's next? So what I call the server provider class system has been also seriously simplified. So before we had all this complexity, and you needed to know if you're taking your licenses to a service provider because, well, you want to save money. You needed to know their authorization levels, whether you can do that. That was actually on you. Now it's looking like this. And the big thing about this is almost, for bring your own license, it now doesn't matter whether they have a SPLA or they don't. I can imagine now a services provider without any SPLA licensing, and I'll explain it. The only important division that remains is this: listed providers and authorized outsourcers. So this is the key division between the providers and who are listed providers. I don't know if you've known this before. It's very simple. Do you know why they call listed? Why they're called listed? There's actually just a list. That's a list. It's a document. It only has 5 lines in it, which it says these are the listed providers, and then 4 bullet points with these 4 names. That's why they're listed. And then we have authorized outsourcers, and it's right now is one of the most frequently asked questions: who are the authorized outsourcers? Not so. This is a very confusing word, authorized, because there are actually no authorizations required. The only authorization that is required is don't be them. Simple as that. So, first in human language. So why that difference is important is that all these new changes only apply to authorized outsourcers. Listed providers remain as they were since October 2019. Plus Azure has its own additional, for the geeks, we have licensing geeks here. Azure has license mobility, plus Azure Hybrid Benefit, plus Windows 11 Azure offerings, products, which the rest of the listed providers don't have. So all these changes apply only to bring your own license to any hosting provider, except for those big 4. Plus, as I said, a few changes apply to on-premises use, which we can discuss additionally when we get to the questions. So, what's changed for the providers? So, I appreciate that none of you are providers, but if you plan or you think, or maybe you can see that kind of reshaping your IT, you have an outsource. So, this is a good thing. Please stop thinking about providers now from the 1st of October as only services providers with hosting. Your incumbent outsourcers with their own data center are effectively now authorized outsourcers. So say there's a, I don't know, Ministry of Justice and a company like Accenture. I don't know if they provide services to them, but I imagine they probably do. So Accenture for them now can be a service provider and host their licenses on their platform, where they may also provide services to other clients. So shared platforms are also included, which is important. Dedicated hardware, nothing changed there. But if there's like a cloud infrastructure with lots of VMs from various end clients, then again, now there's no difference whether that's shared or dedicated. So for providers now, there's no requirement for these two authorizations, license mobility path and KMTH. Why it's important for the end client? Stop caring about it. You don't need to check it. Now everybody's authorized. They don't even need SPLA, really. So simple as that. You may take any subscription license. As I said, what I call a subscription license is, again, if you're paying any sort of recurring fee to Microsoft, that license may be taken to the provider. When you stop paying for it, for example, you cancel software assurance on a perpetual license, you lose that right. So you must continue paying to Microsoft to get those rights. Thing that is not on these slides, but you must know it, is when we talk about server licenses, when you bring your server licenses like this, or even when you want to license Windows Server on premises using the per VM new licensing model, all client access licenses must also have some sort of a subscription on them. CSP hoster. So don't, as end clients, don't even look at that. Because they may host licenses, even CSP licenses on subscription, even if they're not CSP hosted. I'll explain to you, if somebody comes to you and says, we are a CSP hosted, therefore we have an advantage. So the only advantage they have is those who have this authorization may pre-build virtual machines for you using their media and their keys. But the licenses are still yours. That's the only difference. It's the only access to, kind of proactive access to media and keys. So again, it's not a required authorization to host your licenses. And that is for providers. So let's not even talk about it. Although this is the problem of so what? Because Microsoft, the entire landscape of Microsoft licensing and hosting as well, and cloud, it's such an interconnected world. So where may this affect you? In October 2025, services providers, and especially that affects software as a services providers. So if you are, as an example, consuming a hosted SAP service right now, or an Oracle service, some sort of an ERP that is hosted, that you buy as a service from a provider, and they host those workloads in AWS or Azure, or Google, or Alibaba, maybe, I don't know who does that, but anyway, then they may be in trouble right now, and that may somehow affect you indirectly. The problem is there are no details yet right now. Do you want to talk more about it, or do you have any questions about it? Because I really don't want to kind of spend too much time on this unless you're interested. Because this one is difficult to explain if you're not a provider. So what? And clients are you, basically. So the good things, just to summarize, better choice of outsources. I could become your outsourcer tomorrow. I just rent space, put a rack there, put servers there, and I'm your outsourcer. If you like working with me, by all means, I can do that. And you can do that if you outsource any services to other end clients. Windows Server, bring your own license. So it's a good change, because now you could previously you could only take it to Azure, Azure. Now you can take it to any provider, shared or dedicated. And then, how do you do that? With the usage of the new per virtual machine licensing, which works very similar to SQL Server. If you know how SQL Server per VM licensing works, it works very much like that. Happy to answer a question if somebody asks me how exactly it works with all the details and numbers. CSP subscriptions have improved. So if you've been hesitating about whether you want to switch from a different licensing program to CSP because there are limitations. So there are fewer limitations now on the CSP licenses, as I said. The subscription licenses can now host it anywhere. And Windows 11 has on-premises VDA rights, which for some of you may be critical, or your clients.
So Sasha, are they retrospective, those improvements?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So remember the first presentation today that I gave, and he said that you're bound by the terms of the contract when you signed it. Microsoft has a stipulation around it. And what they say is you don't have to accept the new product terms unless you want to.
Right.
So they don't fix you on the product terms that was effective on the effective date of the agreement. You're not bound by that. Unless I've seen one exceptional enterprise agreement where Microsoft, in exchange for perks, fixed the product terms to a specific date, knowing that in a month after that, they would relax the terms. Anyway, I don't want to go there. Simplified Windows 11 terms, blah, blah, blah. So the bad things. And well, it is a bad thing. So 90% of the end clients, at least those that we work with, they don't use smaller providers. They are either on AWS or Azure. And therefore, if you are one of those, nothing except for the on-premises changes, nothing related to hosting applies to you, unfortunately. Maybe it will kind of open the minds of decision makers to the vast number of, I would say, like middle tier, still large services providers, like DigitalOcean, Rackspace, Service.com, Hetzner, I think it's Hetzner, isn't it? There's more to the cloud world than just AWS and Azure and Google. And the other, well, bad or not, if you are one of those clients that is consuming a third-party SaaS, and if it's hosted in a complicated way on one of the listed providers, it may affect your relationship with that provider. I hope it won't. Just to give you a very simple explanation of what I'm talking about. So right now they may charge you for licenses through their hosting agreement, the SPLA agreement. They won't be able to do it in 2025. So whether there's going to be still a charge from AWS to them, then redirected to you somehow, recovered costs from you, we don't know. Because the worst case scenario is you will have to also pay a separate bill from AWS. Whilst right now, for you, it's completely opaque. You just pay into that provider. Let's skip through this, because that's for providers. We don't need to cover it today. I was hoping that at least somebody here would be in the provider world.
Sorry, what does QMTA stand for?
Qualified multi, forget it. That's what I'm trying to kind of
Right, okay.
say. Forget it. You don't need to know. What is qualified multi-tenant hoster? Another name that makes absolutely no sense, unless you know what's behind it. So you had to become qualified. You had to become tier 1 CSP, go through all the qualifications, have your own data centers, and then you would get a right to host Windows 11 and Microsoft 365 apps.
I see.
That is what, and it never really took off. I mean, yes, there are hundreds of QMTH,
Yeah.
but for example, reporting process is still not stipulated. So I think Microsoft looked at that and said, you know what, let's just drop it. Let's make it simpler.
So is it meant that what Microsoft is basically doing is it's opening up the competitive landscape to try and broaden out the number of service providers?
I think so, yes. Well, they were pushed into that to an extent by several movements in the European Union.
Right.
So groups of services providers were lobbying the EU bureaucratic structures to push on Microsoft to level the playing field between themselves and Azure. So they don't really care about AWS and Google, to be honest. I mean, why would I if I was a small provider? But with Azure, why are clients allowed to take a license to Azure, but not to, say, my data center? That's an unfair advantage. And it's not like Microsoft didn't keep any unfair advantage. There are still a few. For example, only in Azure or Azure, you can license a Windows Server data center machine with Windows Server standard licenses. You can't do it on providers. Only on Azure, you're not required to bring your CALs, whilst you have to have CALs with a say to take a license to a service provider. So there are still advantages of Azure. It's still cheaper sometimes to run workloads in Azure, all things considered. It is still for providers, but I'd like to highlight at this point particular. Bring your own license compliance is on end clients. So Microsoft is saying right now, at least, there are very few clarifications about how this is all going to work, although it's already in effect, all these changes are in effect. But the nitty-gritty of how Microsoft will interpret non-compliance, that is still not available, not codified. Right now, sorry, not right now, before the 1st of October, if you had to take a license to a services provider, that still, by the way, works for at least the providers, you had to fill in specific license verification forms. You couldn't just bring the license like that. You had to go through a process. Because, by default, the compliance responsibility is on the provider, not on you. Even when you don't ask them and deploy something in the virtual machine that you rent from them. How this is going to work with suddenly much wider range of services providers and Microsoft allowing you to take your licenses and bring them to their data centers in terms of compliance is not clear, but you probably know Louise Ulrich from License School. So she released yesterday her own guidance around flexible virtualization. This is called flexible virtualization, baby. And she says that, and she usually what's what I'm looking for. She usually says what Microsoft talked about, because she's very close to them. She's saying that the compliance is on the end users, not on providers. So just be careful of that. When you take your license to a services provider, you're still responsible for the compliance of those virtual machines and instances of Office and VDIs and VDAs and whatnot.
I'm just thinking that if you were Microsoft and you wanted to corral in a bunch of customers you wanted to audit, you could go to one authorized user and audit 20 of them in a heartbeat.
Authorized outsourcer.
That is why they are auditing providers. It still doesn't give them the legal right to audit the end users, but they have the visibility of what those end users are doing. However, think about that. Strictly speaking, in the documentation they get from the auditors, they don't get the client names. So unless the provider discloses the names, so the auditor knows the names because it's part of the process. They review the contracts, but the report they submit to Microsoft has obfuscated names: client 1, client 2, client 3, and so on.
Oh, interesting.
So, but we've seen cases when, to defend their position, providers would disclose the names of their end users to Microsoft during the negotiation. Because however large or small the final audit bill is, there's always a negotiation phase. And many providers get away with, say, promising to go into Azure or any other commercial arrangement with Microsoft, because Microsoft's ultimate goal is not to punish the provider. They just want their money.
Yeah.
Future annuity, securing the revenue. That's what they want. So, I think we have a summary slide. Yeah, this is the version with the summary slide. So, I asked myself, can we summarize this into whether the entire, this whole list of changes, is it positive or negative or mixed for specific categories of consumers of Microsoft software? And if you look at the end clients, it's mostly positive. The only really two negative categories who are not in this room are either listed providers or providers of software as a service applications that host their workloads on listed providers. So anyhow, again, this is connected to this. Otherwise, I think Microsoft did a really good giveaway. Happy to answer your question.
Do you get extended support if you migrate a legacy Windows server into Azure?
Yes, yes.
As far as I know, yes, but you don't get it on any other provider.
Okay.
That's another competitive advantage of whether that's fair or not of Azure. I'm surprised nobody's asking about Windows Server licensing rules.
So, on-prem,
Yes.
if I've got an environment that I'm licensing with standard 2016,
Yep.
we had an issue where if a customer wanted to add more VMs into it, you would
Just
just
a
add,
moment, sorry, just be aware that this is being recorded.
that's fine. If you have a customer where you want to add more instances, you would add more licenses.
Mm-hmm.
Until Microsoft released a new version, in which case you had to relicense the whole thing because you can't license with multiple versions. If you've now got an environment where you're licensing, say, 2016, and you now put a 22 VM in that environment, which you can license per VM, how does that impact? Because you're putting it in an environment that's licensed from the host with 2016.
Okay. Let me remove confusion from what they just said. So what you said about you can't license various versions of licenses only applies to one instance or one host. So you can't mix on the host, say 8 licenses of Windows Server 2016 assigned to the host at hardware level, and 8 licenses of Windows Server 2019. That's not allowed. That must be completely, what's what I'm looking for? It must be the same version and edition. Same version and edition, and you know, interestingly, downgrade rights don't apply to single licenses. They apply to fully licensed instances of fully licensed hosts. So you first need to ensure that the host is fully licensed, and then you can downgrade. But then, if you assign higher version licenses and additional license to a host, you can run any previous versions. So that is no problem.
No, so now because you can license Windows Server virtually.
That is a fun one. That is a fun one. Let me show you an example here. So this is a three host cluster. And here you have, let's say everything is Windows Server 2016, 5 machines, 6 machines, and 4, something like it. Here around.
Do you want to bring that here so?
So 5, 6, 4 VMs. And many clients, especially with such small clusters, they use host affinity because they know about these rules. That you actually, if they were all moving and you only had Windows Server standard license, you would have had to license every host for the worst possible situation. If they're static and only say one machine here is dynamic, one machine here is dynamic, one machine here is dynamic, so they can move around. So still you need to kind of think about in terms of some of the licensing software, they're called ghosts. You need to think about those ghosts and pre-license. What you can do now instead is for these moving machines, you may license them per virtual machine. So retain the old licensing rules for the static machines, if you have enough licenses. Because usually those who do that don't have licenses with software assurance. So we're talking about perpetual license. So you don't get flexible virtualization for perpetual licenses. So you basically do that, but you don't have to license for the high watermark, for the worst case situation, for these moving machines. Because you can just view these static machines separately and dynamic machines separately and license them per VM. But there's a big but, cows. Client access license, all the client access licenses must either be counts on a subscription or with a say or any kind of EMS package that has a Windows Server HAL equivalency, which is maybe, by the way, a good option for those clients who are still thinking, do we need EMS? Because many clients need EMS. And that could be a factor for them to cover every user with EMS as well. So there are too many moving parts. There's no one size fits all solution. So You're asking, but I will still tell you. So four things to remember. Software assurance or subscription. CALs also with the same requirements. At least 8 cores per virtual machine, and you must have at least 16 licenses on subscription. Simple. It's very simple.
I think, yeah, so the problem is like, you know, if you have like a static machine, a 2012 static machine,
Yeah.
you know, because of the old rules that you couldn't like,
Static.
match them, the question is like, can you still use a 2012 and then on your virtual machine use it
Yes.
like a 2022 with SA? I'm not sure about that. I've not seen it. I've not seen it written.
I'm sure because you've already if you make sure that the instance is licensed somehow. So what Microsoft said to me when I asked them about it many years ago, like, can I mix that, different versions on a host, because I'm licensing I'm licensing the host for different virtual machines. The response I said, we can't stop you, but we hate it. We don't like it. We strongly don't like it. It was an American.
Right.
It's not like hate, but it was like we strongly dislike it.
So the issue that we've had before is where your first instance where you've got 5, so there's 3 Windows Server standard, or 3 lots of Windows Server standard 16 core. If all of those VMs, for instance, are running 2016,
Yeah.
no problem at all. I want to put another Windows Server 2016 onto it.
Yeah.
Microsoft have released a new version, it's 2019. They will not allow me to introduce 2 lots more of 16 because it's a different version. So I need to relicense.
Do you have an official response from them?
Yeah.
We went through
We did,
Microsoft
yeah.
multiple times and they basically just said, stop asking.
Can we take it offline and
Yeah.
let me look at that?
So this is,
Because
I
I'd like
suppose,
to
the
see the
requirement
interpretation.
from the old world where your license, your right to the grant to the VMs
Yeah.
comes from the licensed hardware. Your license in Apple
It
2016.
still comes from the
2019.
licensed hardware, but the logic that many are still applying, and I've never seen it failing, is if you assign, say we have 16 cores for the sake of simplicity. If you assign 16 cores of Windows Server Standard, you cover 2 VMs. Then you deploy 2 more VMs, but they're version 2012. I don't see anything. Well, that neither stops you or allows you to mix it. So that's maybe where the problem is.
They don't allow.
But a lot of clients do that, and I have never seen a problem in an audit with it. But if you have, I'd like to have a look at that.
It's always been the case that you would license for the greatest version or the greatest edition that's sitting in that environment. problem that we've got now.
That's when you have data center license. I get
Or
that.
even standard. So if you've got, let's say, 12 instances on a host, the greatest being 2016, you're licensing for 2016 on that host by 6 lots to get.
I'd like to see
Yeah.
I'd like to see the email. I'd like to see who sent it to you.
So
What is
it
the
wasn't
level of
about the deployed
authorization?
version, it was about your ability to license that host when Microsoft released a new version.
Again, the way you asked that question, license that host. You license that host for the VM capacity. So it's the way you word it, which is tricky. I don't like it either myself.
We don't like it
But we do
either.
it. But
Let's face it,
we do it.
I think
Yes.
it's like bull, but
Because-
that's what we had to do.
When I explain it to my students, sometimes I say, you created Pocket for 2 VMs.
Yeah.
You want more, you add more licenses. If they're of different version, I thought, so let me have a look at that. But then again, I've seen audits.
Well, I think
I've
it's,
seen auditors looking at this and never question.
I guess it would be more complicated if we're mixing old versions of Windows Server that have different licensing metrics.
That's what
yeah,
we're
but
looking
that's
at.
the issue with the new one.
I wouldn't go. So what I would avoid personally is mixing processor licenses and core licenses. Even in the same situation, which I still think is perfectly fine. But this is where it's more like blows their minds when they see core licenses and processor licenses assigned to the same host. Although not for the purposes of licensing the licensing the host for unlimited virtualization. No, we still license stacking. They don't like the whole concept of stacking, but they can do nothing about it because they allow it. But then again, that rule about downgrade says that you must have license an instance fully with one. Is it homogeneous? Anyway, sorry, with one version in addition.
Yeah, homogeneous.
Homogeneous. So what I want to leave in your minds is that if you've been thinking about moving some of the workloads to your providers or your outsourcers, or you can start thinking about that. It's not much easier. If you are somehow, because maybe if you're consultants, if you're consulting other companies, especially services providers like small outsourcers, they can start tomorrow deploying their own racks and hosting multiple client virtual machines in them. I had a business previously, my previous company, that I started in about 2003 and closed in 2013. It was half software asset management and half system integration. And I wish I had that ability at the time, because we had clients, sometimes we would service the entire building with like 5 or 6 companies. I would have killed for an ability to put my racks there and just sell them everything as a service. Now I can, but I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm kind of out of ideas now. So, yeah. Thank you very much.